fund balance.
You want to build the 10,000 into the budget base, the expenditure.
I want to increase the contingency from 50 to 60. 60 was in the budget.
50 was in the budget, so increasing it by 10. Okay.
Which brings the balance to what?
60.
60.
I know there was some questions, and I know Austin's here.
Could I ask one question about that? So I just want to clarify. So if they need that money, they have to come before Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance to get it, or is it just a line transfer?
It's a line transfer that would go
Who has to
through the
approve that?
first selectman's office.
Just for Selectmen?
Yes, well, right now the charter is a little confusing. We can transfer a bit without going to the boards up to 20,000 from any department. Contingency is its own department, so I do think once we reach 20,000 for whatever reason, it will then go to both boards. So if we move 10,000 for a registrar and then another, I don't know, say we move 20 for registrar, that can go just to the first selectman. And then if we want to move another 10, we would have to come to both boards. If you want to, I would think you can state that you would want to see this. It's just outside the normal process.
Yeah, I would want to see it. And
Okay.
to me, it's contingent upon the filling of the officers if need be, and I know the Board of Selectmen already passed the resolution, but in this case, it would go back before both, right?
That's
After
what I
12.
would like.
That's fine.
Okay.
Absolutely,
make
that
note
that
of
way,
that.
that way we're sure, I'm sure the chief did not,
No,
Sure, the
right,
other
but I
positions
think
are full.
it's, yeah, I agree. Thank you.
that's. Any questions or thoughts on that matter? It still allows us for that to come back before both boards, that. And if he does fill them and he needs it, it's there. That was one. I know there were some questions, and I want Austin's here, I don't know if Austin's staying tonight, but there's Jude, the youth and family services, the position there, as far as I know, that's in the budget.
That would be Scott Cochran.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Forgot.
he's online.
Is there any questions you want to ask?
No, I just thought that I had heard some dissent. It's in the budget for selecting. I thought I was hearing some dissent in here, and I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page insofar as supporting that request.
All right, my only question there, and I have no issue supporting it, I know it's been asked for in the past, I was told, and I know Seth's here, but there was some grant applied for through the BOEs. I think we want to make sure if the grant comes in, that we don't have to refund it twice. They're not sure if the grant's coming in through that position, is that correct?
Yeah, it is. There was a memo that the special ed department that Liz put in for a grant for the position. There was a memo that came from Scott Cochran to both boards saying that, but he's unsure if they're going to get it. So he was pushing for you guys still approving it. We got the grant, great. Otherwise, he would still like to build it into the budget base.
Right, so my question here is, we get the grant, it doesn't come out of our. The line item.
But the grant is soft money and won't continue.
No, eventually we're gonna have to do it correct, but it won't come out this year.
But it will be built into the budget and we will have a savings in that line item for this upcoming year if we get the
As long as
grant.
the grant lasts.
But going forward, it will be built into the general fund budget.
So if they get the budget, if they get the grant, I apologize, if they get the grant, then what happens to that money? Can they spend it on something else?
No, it will stay in that line item and it will be returned.
No, we're on the same page.
It will just lapse at the end of the year.
Yes. I don't know if Scott had anything else, if you wanted him to speak of it.
No, listen, unless there's some questions, no offense to Scott.
So one question, so, and again, I apologize because I'm new, but was this grant specifically for an FTE?
You may want to get Scott Cochran up, he can explain.
Yeah, because I mean, using grants for FTEs in general, you know that grant money's gonna dry up.
So
I agree, but before this has been a position that's been asked for years.
for years, it's part-time right now, included in the budget. And then we funded it to make it full-time with ARPA funds. ARPA funds are running out, and this was Scott's chance to
One
try to
second,
bring
Scott,
it,
before you jump.
bring
Yeah.
the full-time monies into the general fund, so going forward, it would be full-time.
So,
There's some good rationale on page 35.
Yeah, but just in general,
Go ahead.
like for all departments, for all things, I mean, when we use grant money that's for FTEs, we know it's gonna get, either we're gonna cut the position or the town's gonna take it over.
Yeah.
Right.
So I want to say different.
Right.
Once you put it in position, it's so hard to cut.
Exactly.
You own it.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. And I think I said it at the last meeting. If I didn't say it on the record, I've said it in the past, where once you receive grant money for a position, it's the hardest thing to do is cut something out of the budget. So you own it. In this scenario, Scott already had it and was looking for this. So that in this scenario, we're going to fund it anyway. So if we get grant money, it actually helps because we won't have to use it for this year. Use it as a grant last.
Yeah.
But Matt, I couldn't agree with you more. So we said the hardest thing to do is take something out of it.
Right.
And I agree with you as well. I just think the situation in this, with this particular
Particular.
request is a little different.
Gotcha.
So did anybody have a question for Scott or are we good on
I think we're good. You have anything
We're good.
specific, Matt?
No.
Scott, great input. Thank you.
Short and sweet. Short and sweet, thank you. You guys know how to handle me really well. I was gonna call up a 20-minute slideshow, but I figured you guys are all past that now.
You know what, if you could email that to John.
Yeah,
he'll do
please.
it for us.
Thanks.
So, thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Scott.
I think we'll stay with the expense side and at a certain point we'll go to the revenue side. There's a couple of things there we want to recognize. Do you want to discuss CIP? Katie?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I would support, an increase, to what's proposed for CNRE. It seems to me that what has been recommended by the Board of Selectmen, and I'm not even sure it made it in.
It did.
Okay, so, that given the balance, in the out years for CNRE, I would be happy to,
Support.
yeah, knowing that there is always gonna be, use for it.
And if I can, because I always support putting more money in capital, I think I think it's better to infuse it so we don't, and so I would rather do that, but I fully
Yeah.
support putting more money in it. But I would rather do that than put it in the budget. Because then, I think, then you could smooth out the further years if we infuse the money, and I know we've done it before, and that way you can mitigate the increases in future years, right?
Yeah, so the way MIP was originally created was to build up the base in the budget, knowing when the debt comes on, we could reduce CIP. This year, that 274, part of that is the last year of MIP of increasing the base, knowing that the debt service is coming on. So next year, the CIP will be able to drop as the debt comes on. We will have to relook at MIP because some of the assumptions in the plan were lower for increases. So I'm gonna have to relook at that. So any additional infusion outside of the budget base will only help the outer years. So I agree.
I agree.
So that's not something that happens through the budget process, but can we move it at a different,
At a Board of
Yeah,
Finance,
so you can
yeah,
put it-
or Board of
Finance,
Selectmen.
you can put it on and move it.
like tonight?
We can't open the agenda
No.
tonight. 'Ause
It's a special,
Yeah.
John wanted
Fair
to
enough.
know one night.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
will readdress it at a.
No, I think,
Yeah,
but I agree.
if we're in some sort of agreement, even though this is, we're not voting on it tonight. No, I think we all agree.
Discuss
And
it.
if it's an infusion, it's not in the, baked into the budget, it's not gonna affect the mill rate this year, but actually help going forward.
And just so you know, the Board of Selectmen also did support that in their budget workshops, so.
Perfect.
Do they support a number or they just support it in general?
I think on the slides from Peggy and her PowerPoint set up to $1 million in there, but we really did not go into any detail on any numbers. I reserve the right to kind of work the numbers and come
Work
with
the
a
numbers
recommendation.
first. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So just speaking of working the numbers, going through, starting on page 31 with the additional budget requests. I kind of went through and made, and Stacy, please forgive me. I know I sent you one and we never kind of followed up, but
Great, yeah.
work has been nuts. But just going through the fund balance and looking at what the Board of Selectmen intends to potentially use from the fund balance, I came up with a total of 3.8 million plus. that would be used, so that includes coastal resiliency, Polson generator, EOC, Woodland Road, Scotland Road, gym floor, Garvin Point, and OPEB, which Garvin and OPEB don't have a dollar amount associated with them yet. So that makes me very nervous. And I know it comes before us at a later time, but if we're gonna be potentially infusing up to $1 million in from into CNRE, these things additionally coming from the fund balance have me a little concerned. Is
So-
that, am I off base with that?
No, but I sent out an update on the fund balance this afternoon, and that number, John has a printout, I don't know, John, if you wanna pass those out.
Sorry, I'm so.
No, but what I did for this year is I put in the interest revenue, I put in the taxes. So we have over $3 million of operational favorable operational results based on revenue already. So that number has jumped up from the last fund balance sheet that you saw.
Okay.
So you all got that email this afternoon.
Yeah, I can pass this, basically, it's projection is 3.85, 3,850,000.
Of revenue this year so far,
Fiscal 24.
so
So
far.
far, and it's only March.
And that, I mean,
Right.
interest alone is 1.7.
We're about 3/4 through this fiscal year, correct? Okay, so just that will help with most of what is
Well, it's
recommended.
about $4 million, is that what it was?
Yep, it's on the bottom of the sheet.
Okay, so-
477, yeah.
And this is
Right there. Yeah, Gene pointed out to me, thank you.
3,877,512 is what I added up, which doesn't include numbers from Garden Point or OPEB.
Yes, so that number on the new sheet you got today went up 200,000. And that's because when the Board of Selectmen did their workshops, they said 100,000 for that small equipment for CNRE and the pension funding to smooth out the fire pension ADC. So we talked about 100,000 for that and then 100,000 for the small equipment. So your 3,877 is now 4,077, and it is on the sheet that I emailed today.
One step ahead as always. Okay, I'm just cautious about that, makes me nervous.
But you could see the unassigned in the email, the number went up by, to John's point, 3.8 million from the operation.
That's it for me.
So
Did you want a paper copy of that?
Oh, thank you.
that's, go ahead.
When you're talking about infusing, the board of selectmen had suggested up to 1 million. I thought we were talking about 1.6 million.
Right, so there's a difference in infusion into the CIP plan. What we're discussing as a group is using the average of the interest off the general fund for average of 3 years, which is 1.6 million. That was not putting money in the CIP, that was putting it into the operating fund. So the thought process there was the average is 1.6, to use that, it's not a 1 year average or 2 year, it's a 3 year average. And the 1 million, I'm assuming was CIP, up to.
That was a discussion, a number that was put out there, but
Right.
So the gym floor number it says TBD on this sheet, but I had in the book 100,000.
it is 100,400. The two TBDs are for Garvin and OPEB. I think you're off the line.
Oh, I am, okay, fair enough. Damn. Pat myself on the back for a second.
You're trying to call me out.
No, never.
Get me all nervous, Kate.
No, I need to make it make sense for me.
So I want to drift over to the Board of Education, unless there's something else we're missing there, stay with the expense side. So there's been some discussion about reducing the Board of Ed to 1%, minus health insurance, insurances, pension, salary, and that number is 240.
Yes, 240, yeah.
So that's questions been out there discussed. Any other questions or thoughts on that? I know some wanted more, maybe wanted less, but I'll open that up for discussion. Issues?
No, I mean, I'll be very honest, this gives me no pleasure. This is a difficult thing to do, having been a chair of the Board of Education. I was just going through today, like literally 10 minutes before I got here, and just looking at some of the line items that are here. And Seth, I appreciate our very frank and sometimes difficult conversations, but just looking at a few line items like snow removal, last year we used 22,438. They're budgeted this year for 64,900. Like, if there was some indication or illustration that there had been an exercise that we had done and taking averages over 5 years and looking at that, I think I'd feel better about that, and less likely to approve this additional 40,000 that, and there's a few others, but I think, even the tuition, we were getting up to 92,000. We're down to 70,000. I haven't seen any additional push to advertise that. So again, we are not going by line items. That's not our job. But I do think, the exercise that we've all painfully gone through here and that I know the town side has had to do, I just would like to say that.
Right, so I'm gonna jump into some, the numbers, 200 as is, 240, I think we discussed 240, we don't get to go line item by line item, I understand your thing. I know the board chair is here, we haven't worked together to see what we can do to help the town and work together. But in this scenario, and I said it last week, this board has the opportunity or the decision to make one way or the other to whatever this 7-member board decides to do. With everything said in mind, like we cannot pick and choose what we can or cannot cut in a board of ed line item. So with that.
And I pointed out those things just because I.
Yeah, no, I get it. I understand. I just,
I don't-
I know, just for, there were a couple of new board members, I said that before.
If I can be, there is a rationale behind the budget. We do look at history.
Mhm.
For snow, looking at it, that we had a one good year. Putting my other hat on, we had a one good year of the 22,000. There were years of history where
Mhm.
it was higher and we
Mhm.
had to do line transfers. So there is thought that goes into it.
Of course.
It's not just rolling.
I did it. Like I said, this gives me no pleasure. I just felt like as my own exercise, I needed to go in and look a little harder. And I know that there are a lot of unknowns, that the Board of Ed has to budget for. And there are, I'm passionate about our school district and committed to it. I know that we've heard from the Board of Ed that there's an additional $200,000 that they could look at. And I just think this extra 40,000, if there was a way that they could look at it again, I just think that's important. And it makes me, it's hard.
Comments?
Just, I had just wanted to comment that, we came up with the extra 40,000 because it's 1% of the budget plus those items. I don't know if there's any appetite to discuss whether 1% is the right figure. Given that other departments weren't able to reach that 1%. Do we want to go a full 1% or just to see if there's any appetite for discussion on that idea?
I guess you can always discuss things. I do think that in the other members of the budgets, I'm not sure how much flexibility there is. I do understand, the BOE is the bigger part of our budget. I understand that, and no one wants to get the budget cut. I understand that. So we went through this discussion, and if you want to discuss something, you can. I know this, there's money available if something were to happen. I know this Board of Finance, and I know Tom, we're going to help. Which like we've done in the past. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to kind of go down that road. There's nothing to say. If we have a number of things come up that we didn't anticipate, we have $20 million sitting out there that we can come back later to.
I've been spending this 20 million.
No, but
there is.
But point being, there are some increases in the budget that I think, you know, I have to believe there's possibilities to cut some of those line items. And if, you know, some things come up that are unanticipated, I'd like to have the ability to go back and help if, you know, we're convinced that that needs to be done. But I'd be inclined to, you know, at least consider the 240,000.
Sorry, just along something that you said.
Go ahead, Kate.
Well, I just want to get away from we have $20 million sitting
Fine,
there,
good.
because I think that's a narrative that's out there publicly, and it's just not true. We have to have a certain amount. And as we've discussed last week, and I know you weren't here, but on the revenue side, it benefits the town to the tune of $3 million to have that there. So I get your point, but I just don't want to add to that narrative that
Yeah.
we're sitting there, there's no plan for it.
No, just to be clear, I'm not in any way suggesting that we, you know, we just willy-nilly spend that $20 million. But the fact is, you know, there is that option if we were to cut the budget and something comes up mid-year, or there's a number of placements that, you know, are very expensive, we have
Or
the
bad snow
means,
year.
we have the means to revisit it, I guess, is my point.
They know we're gonna get 4 feet of snow next year.
I know.
I mean, that to me was always the frustrating thing. I always said we could tell a department head how many file cabinets they could buy, but we can't tell the Board of Ed where to make cuts. It's one check, and their own Board of Finance, really. But as I looked at this budget and we go through, you know, there will be some increases that if we have to use part of fund balance to fund operating, I'm leery of doing that. And I think once we start building up that budget, it stays there and we have debt coming down the road, that concerns me.
Matt, I know you're in hand up.
Yeah, so I think the 1% is appropriate. That's what the other groups did. There's a precedent for it, you know, in good faith effort. So I think that it's definitely reasonable in principle. I do agree with John. I take a different thought than you. I understand you don't want to add to the narrative of there's just money sitting there. You know, that was an issue that came up. But we do have unassigned funds of that amount. So we have.
Not of 20 million though.
This, we're not gonna put methods, but
Yeah, but I mean, we call it unassigned. And yes, we want to keep a certain percentage there. And there's lots of benefits and stuff, but we have a safety net. So even if we get this wrong, you know, we're blessed in the sense we have a safety net. We can take care of it. So.
And that's always my argument for when people talk about, you know, that fund being like a slush fund. It's not, it's for emergencies, and it's helped this town out a tremendous amount, and I keep going back to the hurricanes, but COVID, the hurricane, all of those things, that we did have the ability to do things, and I think that's the argument, to have that. And then in an emergency, we can step in and help, so nobody's suffering.
to jump on that, and I don't wanna spend too much time on this, but there's a major advantage of having those resources. Because they'll tell you the state or the federal government will reimburse your expenses, and they may or may not, to what degree they may or may not, but I can tell you this unequivocally, it won't be right away. And without that, you talked, we had 2 hurricanes in, you know, short period, 10 decades or so ago, you had some major snowstorms, and I hope Katie's right, that we don't have, you know, much for years, once it stays cold, so the rain freezes.
Right, and we were able to fix roads, we were
Right.
able to take
You have to
trees
wait.
down, we were able to do all that, got reimbursed for it. But we were able to do that so the community could open up, the schools could open up, the town could function before we got the reimbursement from the
Yeah,
feds.
it probably took 18 months, sometimes over
Yeah.
2 years for reimbursement. So to everybody's point, and I've said it, we both, Gene said, we all said it. There's a reserve fund that's there, and I know you talk about to me, using the revenue off of that is because it's reoccurring, it's not a bad thing. Having that safety net in case something doesn't go right is great, it's there. And to the degree, John, you mentioned when I think it was the library had a problem a couple of years ago, we had the money to help out. And that's what's there, is we are, whether it's the library, Board of Ed, town, we are one town.
Yeah.
And we're gonna help each other out. And like I said, and the Board of Ed did come, you know, with what they could with the 200, I understand, you know, we have a job to do too, based on how we feel we can go forward.
I'm not sure if I was clear. I guess what I'm saying is, if we didn't have a safety net and we had a budget that, had to, no questions asked, stick to and didn't provide for any contingencies, then I would almost be less inclined to cut, if that makes sense. But knowing that if that were to ever happen, but then the budgetary process works because we hear the argument, what happened that causes the increase, and we do have, and we don't have $20 million, that was, we have an amount that we have to reserve for the bond raiders, we know that.
And our
We're getting interest off it, I get that, but there's no getting around the fact that we do have something available.
Emergency
If it's an emergency, exactly, thank you.
Sure. Ask a question.
Sure.
Just Stacy.
Yeah.
I think I remember hearing this from meetings in the past, but is there an amount typically that the Board of Education returns each year?
Average. Last year was 200, but I think.
Yeah, I would say that too. It's around the average. I mean, we had a spike year.
200,000?
Yeah, we had a spike year with COVID. It was a
Right.
lot higher, but last year it was 226,000.
So if the average or whatever is over, the fact that there's refunds going back shows that there's a delta. Right?
Yeah, but
Right.
I mean,
It's a-
$60
you
million,
just- right.
it's the smallest
Yeah.
pocket
You
change.
don't know,
Yeah.
and I think last year
It's
we
a
gave it
remedy.
back to them because they were doing so much security, so we worked together. But yes, to answer your question, I think it's been on average about 200 the last 4 years. Right, but not 60 million that we've discussed. One extra this, one extra that, you don't know. It's, it's.
Well, it's important though.
No, it's definitely
If there-
important.
If there's a return coming back, then it shows that
Right.
we can reduce.
But there's another line, if it's not, true responsibility on the BOE side is, on the elected official side is.
And honestly, with a budget their size to come back,
With 200,
That
it's
is
such
pretty
a
impressive.
itty-bitty- Yeah, so I do have an average, of a little over 200,000, but on 60 million.
Right.
It's a
But
little percent that
it's not.
you don't know, emergencies or surprises.
But again, it goes back to the same the conversation we just had a second ago. We have a. And the thing is, if we keep building and building and building.
Okay,
I think one more thing to add
go ahead.
to our future agendas is a broader discussion about the fund balance and planning for that. I know I would appreciate it. I think the public would appreciate it. There's a lot of misconceptions about it and we were just saying, there's not 20 million. There's, when you take out what we are statutorily obligated to have there, plus things that we have coming down the pike, I don't want to be unprepared. down the pike.
Yeah, so you do get an update at every meeting, your fund balance, and then it's not really a statutory requirement, that is a Board of Finance regulation, the 10%. So it's something that the Board of Finance set up. Let's keep this aside for emergencies, for unknowns, and the rest historically we have used.
Because the state recommends more than what we.
No.
No, the,
Not
our
necessarily.
auditors,
It's the rating agencies, the GFOA, there's all different requirements out there. The rating agencies used to look at just the general fund, which we were well below, they would say 25%. But now they changed their scorecard and they look at all of our capital funds as well. So we're pretty
Still very healthy. and
We're
it's
pretty
all in the
healthy and on
bond.
the mark of where they want us to be.
So to that point, I know you don't want to belabor this, but in
No, listen,
in future
it's important
meetings,
to you. Go ahead.
in future meetings, should we articulate what the Board of Finance or should we revisit what we want as a percentage?
Listen, you could always, I think that you can always look at the regulations the Board of Finance passed, absolutely. I have no
Yeah.
issue with that. To me, I've said 1,000 times, the healthier the fund balance, when you can use the reoccurring revenue to offset. I have no issue at all using reoccurring revenue to offset our budget because it's reoccurring. It's when you take the principal out and all of a sudden it's down. So I looked at that discussion too. Yes, it's mostly for your bond rating and everything else, because as much as we say we have a reserve set aside, if something were to happen, you could spend that money too. It's not, so
I think to Katie's point, though, I think what, if I'm hearing you correctly, you want to be able to articulate what it is. So we're not saying there's just a free-for-all bottomless pit.
Right.
It's that there's a certain amount that we have to set aside, and we have to decide what that's gonna be. Right?
Yes, and given that inflation and costs have gone up, it might be
Yeah,
an
and I,
opportunity to look at, because GFOA and our regulation are different.
right.
Correct.
So I think to what I think I'm hearing from both of you, just at the meetings, when we, every month, every meeting, we do get the undead fund balance, we
Yes,
tend to
thank you.
get coming up projected uses of that at the bottom. So maybe just call it out a little bit more in meetings so that the public knows where we are.
Okay, John?
And yes, I got it. The other thing, to everyone's point, they still have to come before this board, we need to spend it. It's not like
Yes.
we get the projected use and use it.
Well, over 20 grand.
Over time.
All right, anything else? All right, we're gonna go to the revenue side for a few minutes. Here, we're not,
Which one?
we're not gonna be, to me, Stacia, I just want to see is the use of ECS, the grant money, and then the 1.6 million on the recurring revenue. We went through this. John, I know you were on the call. I don't know if anybody had discussions on that, but I want to firm up the revenue. We don't do anything in the mill rate yet because we don't know about the appeals and finalizing the grant list. So we can't do anything. That'll come after the after the referendum.
So what I did for the revenue, in your big book, you had a section for revenue. We did increase some of the various accounts when you originally received the revenue projections. So under the 2025, there was 3.146. This was on, is this in the blue book too? Yeah, it is. Okay.
It's in this little blue book
Yeah.
here too.
Should be in the back somewhere.
36, I think.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so
I'm sorry,
the
what
third
page?
column in from the left,
36,
I'm
the left.
36. We're starting with 3.146, which is a little bit over 100,000 more than last year.
Where exactly are you?
On page 38, actually, the total on page 38. If you go in 3 columns from the right, it says 2025 town department.
Yeah.
It has 3,146, 3,146,000. That's originally what we recommended to you before we started talking about increases. If you look somewhere in the middle, go over 2 columns to the left, last year it was 3,042. So before we even started talking about interest, we did go up a little bit. So if we start with that 3,146, I'm bringing my interest up from 272 up to 1.6 million. So this number is gonna go up 1.328, it's the delta.
Meaning, what's the bottom?
272 that we budgeted last time. Yeah, so.
I'm gonna give you the
It's
total.
160.
I'm just walking you through.
But
Thank you.
we did budget 272 last year, so now we're gonna budget 16, and the difference is the 1.328.
Gotcha.
Don't steal her.
Sorry.
No, you said it much better than me.
That's why she gets big bucks.
So the other item that's gonna be added to that column is 395 for ECS, which brings total revenue that we would vote on tonight, 4869,324. Which is a 60% increase from last year,
4869324.
4869,324,
That is 16 and the
395.
Anything else in there?
That was it. So you have the detail of everything before those 2 adjustments.
I just want to say one thing. We used to talk a lot about, and I think this board does the same. We talked about fiscal planning, and it's not just a budget. We look out, we're very conservative, but we know what's coming, and we don't make decisions in a vacuum. So I think things like this, where we look at averages, we look at how often we've gotten those funds back. I think we're very responsible in when we make decisions. They're not just not to save 1 year of a budget. It's because if we do it this year, it's better for next year, it's better for the year after. And we really look at like a 5-year, I think, kind of like CIP, right, Katie? The idea that we know what's coming. There are things we don't know. We have the undesignated fund balance, but we make decisions based on what's gonna happen past this 1 year. And I think that's really important on why we make decisions that we do. Except when debt's coming on, we know debt's coming on, we have MIP, CIP, we know in the out years it's very high, we infuse money into it. And those are the kinds of decisions this board does a really good job of making.
Very good point, especially come to talk about the debt and the plan that Stacy and the finance team put together with Mitt. Because if not, we would be looking at a real spike.
Right.
Where we are now. So the increase in revenues with 48693 we're gonna go to the expenses anyway. I just want to, real quick, you have like just a projection on hypothetically on the.
Yeah.
This doesn't, we're not there yet, but just kind of give an idea of where we.
Yeah.
If we reduce the budget the way we wanted, the 240 for the Board of Ed, increase the revenue by 4869324. I think everything else is in the budget there.
We add the 10,000
Add the
to
10,000.
contingency with an assumption of 500 for fund balance. I know we're not ready to
Okay,
do that, but right now, just to throw something in
right, that's
there.
gonna depend on what other variables are.
Yeah, and that was what we used for the last couple of years, so I just threw that in. And then the grand list as of right now is about a little over 38% growth for the total grand list. So if we look at a property last year and look at a 38% growth on that same property, because that's what the total grand list is going up. It's an estimate. If you go up lower, it's gonna be lower. If you go up higher, it's gonna be higher. It's about a 1.5% increase in your taxes.
So just to summarize it, probably the same or maybe a little bit differently. Basically, if we pass the discussion we had with the revenue expenses and your assessment went up on average 38%, which is what that is, your the increase would be 1.5%. If it went less, it's obviously gonna be less. If it went up higher, it's gonna be a little bit more.
And the way the mill rate, I mean, the grand list going up 38%, but the actual mill rate is going down 26%. It doesn't go down at the same because of the new budget. So that's how it all comes down to 1.5%.
Anybody have any questions on that?
Yeah, just
Go ahead, Mike.
just to clarify, so if the average is 38%, and so the increase would be 1.5%. Was the 38% the average or the median?
Neither. It's the total grand list grew by 38%, and that is a number that we use for comparisons.
Okay, got you.
It's
Okay.
not the average,
Gotcha,
it's
right.
not the median.
Just in general, that's a whole.
In general, total
Gotcha.
grand list goes up 38%. And that's, kind of like just a guide.
Yep.
You can pretty much play with the
Some
numbers.
will
yeah.
be more, some will be less.
Yeah.
John, you had your hand up?
I did, kind of going down that road. If we didn't have reval this year, our mill rate now is 29.97.
9.7.
If we didn't go through reval this year, the mill rate would be 30.41.
You increased it by 1.5%. Yeah, but the mill rate, based on everything we've been talking
Right, still
about,
some variables.
is going to 22.03. Based on
Right.
the assumptions that we have today.
Right.
The AAs they're meeting every night for the month of March, so the numbers could change.
And based on using 500K from
Correct. Collection rate,
collection rate. Which I don't know.
How much is each mill?
it would be a percentage of the grand list, so it would be 4.2. The grand list is 4.246 billion right now. So you would take that divided by 1,000.
I'm just trying to figure out the 500,000 comes out to how much of
You're gonna throw all this.
a little more than a mill, a little.
Sure.
So if we weren't using fund balance, our mill rate would have gone up to 31.41
Well, let's see,
or thereabout.
if I take that 500 out. Oops.
All right.
The whole budget. If I take that 500 out. It's going up 2.05%.
Okay,
And the thing here, just remember revals, not everybody, the reval's not the same for everybody, that's the tricky part here.
Oh,
Some
exactly.
people will be less, and some people might
Right.
be 40, 50, 60%, so it's hard in a reval year that, if everything went up the same or down the same, it makes it a lot easier, it's not the case, and.
And we're required to do the reval, I just want to be clear,
Yeah.
it wasn't something we decided to do. We're required to do that.
So that's the issue there. If everybody went up the same, it's one thing, but they're, some people may be happy, some people may not be, but we're doing the best we can.
People get confused if oh my God, my taxes or my assessment went up 38%, my taxes are going up 38%. No, the mill rate goes down, not at the same rate, but Brandless goes up, mill rate goes down.
I guess you can view it as, you know, a reval basically rights the wrong. There were people that were being overtaxed, people that were being undertaxed. But I think a good way to look at this is to say, if we didn't have a reval year, we'd go up 2 mils.
Not even.
Well, if we didn't use fund balance.
It's fun.
Right. I mean, that's the way I'm viewing it myself.
Any other questions on the expense or revenue side? I'd like to get this done tonight as long as everybody's okay with that. So why don't you, I would like to actually, I don't think we've ever voted on the revenue, but I'd like to vote on the increase in the revenue side. That's okay with everybody, the increase of the 4869324. You want to do the total?
Total, that is the total.
So I make a motion to approve the 4.869324 million in the revenue.
On the revenue, which includes the use of the fund balance. Motion was made, second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I think, you know, as you laid out in one of our previous meetings, the work that you and Stacy have done, the averages, this makes sense. You know, it's been consistent. It's something that we could count on. We can assume to count on.
Yeah.
And again, as we said in the past, we have a safety net. If we get it wrong, we're okay.
And I just want to be clear that this is something we continue to monitor. So if we start to see that we're not getting that money, then we will do the same thing we're doing now when we notice that we are getting it. So this is something we keep our eye on.
Thank you, that's Stacy. So, but I do agree with and her team and her staff and her team, they, you know, but I do, that it's the average, I'm very comfortable with that number, because it's a 3-year average.
One last question. It's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
You said we've been using the 500K for a while. How long has that been?
Let's see,
40 years.
I have it
I
for,
think you're off it on 2019.
yeah, 2019, we got it down to 0.
Under,
2000,
I was on the board for a week though.
2020, we brought it up to 673. We needed it to, I think we wanted to
It's beginning to go.
keep things
that
COVID.
was beginning COVID, yeah.
We actually went up to 750 in fiscal year 21. And then 22 and 23, we dropped it back down to 500.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there, even though we've said we've used it, our fund balance has grown, so we technically have.
Yeah,
right?
no,
Yeah,
But I think it shows another example of how we don't make decisions in a vacuum and we don't leave it, we adjust based on the actual numbers.
So we have a motion and a second, we're still in discussion, any other discussion? We'll do it without a roll call, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention, so that motion increased the revenue by 4869324 carries. All right, we got the town side and the BOE side, correct?
do the town, you want the total for the
I
town?
want the total for the town, yes, we increased by that 10,000.
Yep, so you have the 30, so now it's 33,974,100.
$33,974,100.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the total town budget for fiscal 25. $33,974,100. Motion is made by Kate, second by two. $33,974,100. Motion is second. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. On the BOE side, I need a minus of 240 and then give me the number, please.
63, 645, 156.
63, 645, 156, fiscal 25. I need that in the form of a motion. Anybody? Matt, motion made, second. I'll second that. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? None motion carries. Hey, that wraps up our budget for now. Then we have the
Public hearing.
public hearing on April
18.
18th. It's
Yeah.
here.
Before we close, I think it
It's
is
here.
very important for the public to understand. I think it's a unanimous vote. It's a fair budget. We've all put the time in, we've made some tough decisions. But this board works really well together, and I think we've done a good job by the taxpayers. And there may be things in it that are not ideal, and I agree with that. But this is, a fair budget based on what's in front of us and our ability to plan for the future.
I think this is a very good board. We all do work together. We communicate well. The questions are there. Of course, we have a help department. Stacy
Thank
and her
you to
team.
the finance.
But I
team.
agree.
Thank you for your
Not
guys'.
everybody gets what they want. It's the whole process. Thank you very much. And not everybody gets exactly what they want. I understand that, but I also understand that we'll work together to make sure we're doing the best job. Yes, Matt.
So I love what Gene had said earlier too about we don't do things in a vacuum and that we plan for the future and stuff. And I definitely hope in future meetings outside the budget process that we bring this up, that we do 5, 6, 10-year look out. And hopefully be able to talk about that, what's going to look like with what we know now, but also to be able to communicate it to the public. So they know.
I agree. And listen, you can always bring things up, and Gene brought up a good point, how we budget, it's not just a one-year process. We continue to do it. So if anything that you think of that you want to bring up, just go ahead, or let me know. I mean, Fillmore was famous for that, so. John, put this, so not a problem. Anything at all. I just think that I like the way we work together. And I'm sure everybody would say they could use a little bit more money, but, except for Austin, he's good.
I just came to support us, thanks.
I appreciate that. Any other thoughts before we close this meeting out? In a couple minutes, our next meeting. Oh, what the public hearing is,
It's in here, Board of Finance is in here.
They voted us.
no, not our next meeting, the public.
Oh, the public hearing is here at town campus, in here, I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we can adjourn this now. It is
So moved.
6:50, March 15th. Got a motion to adjourn. Second, any discussion? Oh, no? Oh, yeah, she did the public hearing. Yeah, it's here. No?